everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. And today I am mad, or at least I'm not shocked, but I am disappointed because today, once again, we have to talk about the actual dangers of doing BDSM, because it is not just about flogging or breaking skin. And actually, we should be a lot more concerned about the kinky shops and vendors we buy from, the materials they supply, and all of that, especially when our or our partner's life may be on the line. Because when I looked into the quality of some of these items, it was so much worse than I expected. So this all started because of a story on FetLife that motivated me to look into this. And because of the fact that the people involved in that FetLife story have already been experiencing harassment, I'm going to keep this part of it as anonymized as possible. I'm not going to be sharing screenshots, but trust me, the evidence for this is out there. I would not be talking about this if I didn't have firm evidence to back up my claims. So, what originally happened? Well, a rope top and I believe also an instructor in the community was doing a rope suspension, as you do, and during the suspension, they experienced a catastrophic equipment failure of a kind that we very rarely see discussed. Their rigging plate suddenly snapped, resulting in their bottom getting facial injuries so severe that they are now having to save up to pay for veneers. And I'll give you one guess. How do you think the company who sold them that rigging plate responded to this situation? Do you think they were compassionate or at least rightly horrified? Do you think that, maybe to avoid a lawsuit, they might have offered to pay for the bottom's medical care? No, of course not. Seemingly this company, which shall remain nameless because I do not want a lawsuit either, all but told this person to pound sand, and as of the writing of this video, has not sufficiently addressed the issue on either their social media or on their website. They are very, very active on FetLife. Wonder why? So there's a chance that they responded to something and I missed it, but the point is, anyone just waltzing along trying to buy shibari equipment in Florida who happened to stumble upon their social media or storefront would have no idea that their gear just horrifically injured someone. Not only are they still selling this rigging plate design on their website for a cool $100, if you Google shibari ring, they still show up on the first page of search results. Great stuff. But wait! It does get worse because it turns out, allegedly, the design that failed is also a knockoff of a creation made by a well-known body modification and suspension artist. And let me tell you all right now, this is barely scraping the top of the iceberg when it comes to this whole fiasco, because apparently they allegedly knew that their equipment had problems and they just kept selling it anyway. Someone else had tested their products and found that they failed below a reasonable amount of load for suspension bondage, and they just kept selling this stuff. The only thing that they have ever even vaguely acknowledged is selling equipment that was based on a different person's other stolen design. So yeah, that's right. They were selling not one, but two knockoffs. Allegedly. The only acknowledgement for that, though, was a change in the description on the product page, which now reads, quote, "This is a beautiful shibari ring. We do not want to take anything away from a designer, so we no longer sell this. Sorry for any inconvenience." Not even directly addressing what the problem is or where somebody could get the actual design. And if this place is willing to sell not just one, but two knockoff products and continue to knowingly sell faulty goods, what else is going on behind the scenes that we just don't know about yet? I was, however, for this situation, at least a little bit heartened to see that nearly everyone on social media was unanimous in agreement that this was the fault of the store and their supplier rather than the fault of the rigger for just not knowing better. And that does beg the question, though, what went wrong? And how can we do different things to keep ourselves safe and to avoid experiencing this kind of equipment failure for ourselves? This is totally outside the scope of my expertise, so I talked to one of my friends who has extensive personal experience with climbing, as well as professional experience in, let's say, a very closely related area. The first thing that was immediately obvious was that this equipment was not load rated or tested, and it also appeared to be made from cast aluminum, or aluminium if you prefer, which is not suitable for suspension rope bondage. Funnily enough, the very store that sold this rigging plate seems to be aware of the fact that this could potentially cause problems, as they have an entire, very fancy little safety PDF you can download on their site, which reads, in part, quote, "Rings are never rated, and I don't trust wood ones, but that's me. Are they stainless or just steel? Stainless steel has less chance for issues and is stronger. What kind of stainless? Yes, there are lots of types. Check the welds. Importantly, know something about metal. It takes 15 to 30 minutes of research and reading to get enough information to make informed decisions for yourself." So I guess they didn't take the chance to do 15 minutes of research in order to figure out that cast aluminum is not a good choice for keeping bodies off the ground safely. Weird. But are rings never rated as they so claim? Answer to that is a little bit complicated. So most of the time, no. But sometimes yes. And I found this out because I scoured the internet up and down looking at all of the major shibari rope suppliers that I know of, and I looked to try and find any of them that carried a made-for shibari stainless steel ring or some kind of plate. And I looked at about 9 different suppliers, and only one of them carried a rated device that was made primarily for rope bondage. This shop designs its own rings and tests them at outside testing facilities. They post some of the specs for the public to be able to see and have, as of right now, one video showing brake testing on a single design. They are the only place that I found doing this for made-for shibari metal rings. I did find 3 that listed the load rating for wooden rings, like the kind used for gymnastics, which provided this information on their websites. One of the 3 had a blog talking about testing the ring for how and when it would break, and they found that it would break about approximately between 850 pounds and over 1 ton. With the caveat that wooden rings are made of a natural material and thus have more unpredictable variance than metal. And this is also just like a one-off test. They did a simple static load rather than a dynamic load, though it did show signs of wear before completely failing, which is a potential advantage in some people's minds. Like, for example, some people like to tie off of bamboo, and when it's prepared on purpose for shibari suspension and evaluated for that, the idea is that it will sort of slowly show failure versus having a sudden all-at-once failure, and that might allow you to be able to react in the event of an equipment failure before it just completely drops somebody on their face. I don't really have strong opinions about that, if that's like the right logic there or not, but that's how some people think about it, and that's potentially why some people might choose a wooden ring over a metal ring or over a metal plate. But in any case, providing even that level of information is the exception, not the rule. The majority of websites that I looked at did not offer the type of information you would need in order to make a truly informed decision about your purchase from a risk-aware perspective. Most did not list that they did not have a load rating, and that load rating was even something that might be important. Many did not provide information about how the plate or ring was constructed, such as whether it was cast or not, and or where it was manufactured. Some didn't even say what kind of material the plate was made from. Descriptions included language like, quote, our original suspension ring, handcrafted and individually tested by the maker, is the most trusted in the business, without including any testing information, or these stainless steel shibari rings are wonderfully made and of the highest quality. They are mirror polished with no traces of welding. Pretty words for selling a product, to be sure, but not really all that helpful. How can we know something is high quality without providing evidence for why it is? This is not something we can just take people's words on. People's lives are at stake here. And I think that is just the problem. So many people, and this is not their fault, but this is what we do. We just take people's words for it, that their products are good. We think, oh, well, my favorite shibari instructor wouldn't use their products if they weren't safe, or they wouldn't be vending at this big convention if they didn't make good stuff, or even just like, well, metal is pretty strong, so like, how could it fail? I've never heard of anyone saying that a metal ring failed before, because that's all we normally really have to go off of. Meanwhile, I know of at least 2 currently operating shibari storefronts that are ran by people who have numerous serious accusations of sexual assault against them, let alone people whose equipment may have actually hurt people. This is a totally unregulated market with zero oversight, and we need to start acting like it is. People can say anything they want about their equipment, and even if they lie through their teeth about everything, no one can really stop them. Anyone can go on Alibaba or Temu and buy giant spools of rope and some cast aluminum garbage and sell it at an extreme markup or edit photos to make the items appear higher quality than they actually are. Anyone can make an Etsy account or a FetLife page or a Shopify website and flood it with fake reviews from AI bots. If you wouldn't buy rope that wasn't load rated and tested, what about the rest of the equipment you use? How can you truly have a risk-informed shibari practice if you don't really know what you're using, if it has been tested or not, or if you don't know how it fails? The problem is that it's really just been people cobbling together what they think they know from other people, and then using their interest in shibari to make a quick buck, frankly, a lot of the time. And given how fly-by-night all of this is, we can assume most of these places probably don't have product liability insurance. And I've often kind of half-jokingly said that the fire marshal closes down more dungeons than any other form of law enforcement. But it is also true. People in the kink community, 9 times out of 10, are flying by the seat of their pants, operating a business that they have no idea how to run, and they don't know about insurance or liability or local regulations or how to source ethical, well-made products. They just think, how hard could it be? Bob in Minnesota did it, so why can't I? And they just freaking go for it. Yeah. And this idea was really solidified for me as I continued to research for this video. I was shocked to discover that one very well-known shibari studio in the UK was knowingly continuing to sell a ring that multiple reviews had alleged wore down quickly, developed holes, and buckled during like the first couple times it had been used. Multiple other vendors were also selling a similar hollow-style ring without public reviews, declaring that it was both safe and lightweight with zero safety data to actually back up that claim. So I can only conclude that none of these vendors know what they're talking about. I mean, they aren't engineers. They are not professional trained aerial riggers. For the most part, they are people who just really like rope bondage, and they turned it into a job somehow, and they learned from someone who learned from someone else, and so on and so on and so on, without any kind of accreditation or licensing or oversight or anything at all. They figured out how to sell rope on the internet, and bingo, bango, bongo, they have a store now. They might, for example, care about the load rating of the rope they sell, sometimes, but no one really expects their metal accessories to fail, I guess. Probably because they trust whoever they're buying their supplies from, and they just haven't had an issue yet or know anyone who has. which does not make it impossible or even unlikely, because keep in mind too, 99% of these stores are not making their own stuff. They are buying from someone who probably bought them from someone else to sell to you. And their equipment is only as good as all of those other people's words. That's probably at least partly what happened to the person whose plate failed. The same plate is apparently supplied by a source that supplies to other stores, and none of these stores apparently realize the risk of selling this plate. They may not even know that the design is a dangerous knockoff of a legitimate one that is safer, and even if they do know, they may not be able to tell what makes one version safer than the other, because at the end of the day, a shibari enthusiast with a dance performance degree isn't going to be able to tell you about metal manufacturing practices, even when they have a shibari store. That's not really their area of expertise. And I think sitting with this reality is part of what we can do to keep ourselves safe. We should be much more skeptical of all of these stores because they aren't necessarily better experts than we are, even if they have fancy safety PDFs and handouts on their website or proclaim they have high standards for quality with no description for what that means. Quality could just mean looks nice. Can they tell you where they source their equipment from, how it's made, what is it made from, has it been tested, who is it tested by, when, where, all of that? If they can't or will not answer those questions, is your partner's life worth it? Looking back on it now, it seems painfully obvious that we all should have been asking more questions and expecting more from these vendors, but we just did not. So please be wary of places that promise quality without results or who don't have publicly reviewable reviews. And my fellow bottoms, please do not be afraid to ask your partners questions like this too. Where they got their stuff, what they know about it, how old it is, and if it's been rated or tested. It is your job to take your own safety seriously because you can't assume anybody else will. And I think the problem is not that, these storefronts are operated by evil people who don't care about keeping you and your partner safe. I think the issue with this actually starts a lot earlier, and it goes back to how these people who now operate stores were previously educated on rope bondage and the kinds of risks that they were learning about. And given, I haven't taken every class on suspension, but I've been to a couple of beginner courses, and most of them have been focused on rope selection and uplines themselves and upline management and hardpoint evaluation, with very rarely a mention of any other piece of equipment that you might use. Save for carabiners, which a lot of purists don't really use anyways. And so no one ever told them about the dangers of cast aluminum, so they can't tell you. No one ever told them that a ring could fail, so they don't think about it. It's a non-issue, right up until it's not. And yes, most failures in bondage come from the rigger, or from an improperly installed hardpoint, or a rope failure, or something like that. But other types of failure can still happen. It literally just did. But those dangers all remain invisible, and so because it's invisible to them, it then stays invisible for the people who learn from them, and who work with them, and buy from them, until something comes along and forces the issue. But the funny thing is, in this case, we actually do have better, safer options. We don't have to use these cute little welded metal rings everyone uses that are made to look like trees. We borrow stuff from climbing and other disciplines all the time already. People use climbing straps and rated locking carabiners constantly. And at one point, that was a new idea until folks started educating other people about it, and they showed it happening in public and using it in public, and then it slowly became more commonplace. Honestly, sometimes because somebody witnessed a catastrophic failure and then they decided, hey, maybe I should choose something safer. What's out there? What else can I use? People use the rings that they use or the plates or whatever gear they use, not because those are always the safest options out there, but because they saw someone else using the same one, so it must be okay. Or their instructor had one, or whatever. We could use actual real rigging plates from trusted manufacturers with the load rating stamped right on them. And the kicker is, they aren't even expensive. Sometimes they're cheaper than the Alibaba crap we're being sold right now. But you see, it's just not the done thing. It isn't popular. People don't learn on that kind of equipment, so they don't use it. They don't look for it. They wouldn't even know where to find that kind of stuff. But so many places now are selling rated spinners and straps and carabiners. It would not be all that hard for actual, real, rated rigging plates to become the done thing also, and I hope that that is more the direction we're going to go in. It's a shame that change so often has to come only after someone's been hurt, but that is the way of things oftentimes. I am honestly just really scratching my head wondering why actual load-rated plates have not been widely adopted yet, and why we all started to use simple metal rings in the first place. And the only thing I can really think of is just like, but that's not what so-and-so did, or that doesn't look like shibari. And I would love to hear some rigging instructors or tops weigh in on why this is, and people who have been in the scene for longer than me. But so far, I have just not heard any explanation for why we haven't gone in that direction, other than shibari courses are not taught around using that style of equipment for suspension. And none of this is to say that I am personally an expert. I cannot tell you what a suitable load rating is, or what your risk profile should be, or what brands you should be looking for. I am just inviting all of us to have more curiosity when it comes to our safety. We should not replace reasonable investigation with blind trust. Although this video is focused primarily on a story about shibari gone wrong and really deeply getting into what happened, the same principles apply to all different kinds of kink gear, whether it's medfet stuff or wax play candles or canes or electroplay toys or knives. The risks are all different, but the same core issue is really there. Anyone can be a vendor. Anyone can open a store and resell bottom-of-the-barrel imported goods for 10 times what they paid, and while they should inform you of the risks and specs of the stuff they're selling, they don't always. So it's also on us as consumers to ask questions and to use discretion. And it's on us as players to ask questions about our partner's equipment and its history too, and to be educated as much as we can be about the kinks we want to engage in. None of these things will ever make the play we do 100% safe, but it can make us more aware of the risks we are taking on and give us opportunities to mitigate risk if we can. Maybe we ought to start vetting our suppliers and vendors the same way that we do play partners, since there's nothing else really holding them accountable. I'm not going to tell any of you all what you should be doing, but I am going to be doing what I've been doing for a while, which is I actually already only use load-rated suspension equipment made for climbing anyway, and while it is not always the most aesthetic, my teeth and my life are worth the cost of being a little bit less pretty for a photo. Universe, can we get some decent classes on hardpoint and equipment selection from people who actually know what they're talking about, like in a professional academic capacity, and not just people who like rope, who are passing along common knowledge they got from other people, who got their knowledge from somebody else, who got it from somebody else. I am shocked that that has not been more of a thing already, but it really, really should be, because unfortunately so often the way that we make change in this community is an iterative process. It almost reminds me, unfortunately, of how I don't know, Sam Altman talks about, AI chatbots, where it's we go fast and we make mistakes and, things are going to happen, they're going to be bad, and then we're going to pull back based on, user feedback and experience and blah, blah, blah. And it's this is hurting people. In the meanwhile, we're just, testing all this out. People are being hurt. And it just is interesting to me knowing that, especially for shibari, when there are so many related disciplines to what we do that we could be borrowing more equipment from, that seemingly we've been slow on the uptake, and or people are willing to accept more risk in exchange for something looking a particular way. But because of the fact that we're sort of watching people, even if there's a trickle down effect, is what I'm trying to say. is you have people who they're making an informed choice and they're deciding, I am willing to take on this higher level of risk by not using carabiners or not using a rated plate or whatever. And then people learn from them and watch them and they go, oh, this is what people do. And those people down the line from that original person making a more informed choice, they're making a less informed choice because they're going off of what the social norm is versus a more rigorous investigation around the choices they could be making. And then because other alternatives are not visible, people don't know that other options exist, and because it's not talked about, people don't know what choices they could be making differently. Does that all make sense? And as I was saying, this story is about a particular incident with shibari because suspension bondage is one of the most dangerous things that we do in kink routinely, and people really underestimate it. But this does apply to so many different kinks, whether it's like fire play or wax play or anything else. I have heard all different flavors of horror stories of equipment going on the fritz at a really inopportune time, or things being used out of spec and then people being hurt as a result of that. I have witnessed some things in my time that make me very concerned, and you can't necessarily, as a vendor or as a designer, predict every single way that somebody might use a toy that you make or that you buy for resale. But more consumer education, I think, would be beneficial, and just be very skeptical. I am honestly, I didn't really talk about this. I am really miffed at the fact that this vendor who was selling this plate and other equipment that they had on their website, knowing that it had previously failed other people's tests, they continue to sell it, and they put on this like really beautiful face on their website. You know, they're super interactive with customers on FetLife. You know, they're interacting with anyone who gives them like a good review or posts a photo of their rope, and they give this like big game about like, here's like safety information, and here's like a Q&A, and here's like whatever, right, of just like all this stuff to put on this face like they're giving you an informed experience. But when you're new, you don't know what you don't know, and it's actually going to give you dangerously a false sense of security when you get the kind of information. Because yes, it is telling you a little bit about how, you know, you should research this stuff, or, you know, is it steel or stainless steel or whatever. Like, there's little bits of information that make you feel like you're informed, but you're not actually. And that's really freaking dangerous, because ideally, yes, people would go to in-person classes and talk to people and practice and, you know, put a pillow in the air first, or a chair or whatever. You know, they would practice and practice and practice. But let me tell you, there are people out there who go, I could probably just figure it out. It's like sight unseen, never even seen a shibari suspension up close, decide, I could do that. And they decide to put their spouse in the air over a hardwood floor. And then sometimes things go wrong. So that false security is so dangerous, and I'm not sure what the answer is. And yeah, it's such a devastating, terrible scenario, and I don't know where the solution is, other than like we need to get ahead of the curve on this one. We need to get ahead of the 8 ball and not just always be on the back foot of waiting until something happens to someone to then update our community standards or update our personal standards of risk, and have to learn from those like life-altering tragedies that happen. And maybe this will be a thing that sparks some change. I have hope that'll be the case, because this was very widely discussed on FetLife at the time when it came out. And yeah, I would love to hear y'all's thoughts about this one in a comment down below. If you heard about this, if you do shibari, if you have more experience than I do. Again, I want to be very clear. I am not telling you what I think you should be doing or what your risk profile should be. I am just the bottom. That's not my area of expertise. But I do want to give people the opportunity to reflect and think about, am I really asking the right questions when I'm choosing where to make a purchase. Or if I go to a class, what kinds of questions should I ask that I haven't asked before? You know, giving you all that just kind of maybe like for me, a little bit of that like light bulb moment of like, oh, like I was not aware of how much invisible trust was really like scaffolded over like these decisions I'm making. And like now that we can be more cognizant of it, we can investigate this and hopefully make better, more informed decisions in the future. I am just not exactly clear myself on what is the level of risk that we're taking on versus not, or how to really accurately evaluate that. And I am certainly a more risk avoidant person than some people are. And as an educator, I think that's a perspective that I speak from. Certainly there are people that are making informed choices to take on that level of risk for whatever reason. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily wrong. I'm saying that there is an issue when people aren't being given that information and aren't able to make an informed choice, or they're being misled about how informed they are because a shop maybe has a vested interest in presenting as though they are more of a resource on this and more of an authority on this than they really are, to give you a false sense of security, to encourage you to feel like you're ready to make that purchase. I don't know. This is all very complicated. Seems weird to me. Don't know. Very disappointing. Very tragic. And yeah, this is just, maybe this has to be just a cold splash of water reminder that what we do in kink is very dangerous. People do get hurt doing this, severely, permanently hurt, and we should respect our equipment and respect what we're doing, because we never know when our number is gonna come up for something to fail or for something to go wrong, and we can mitigate as much as we can. We should be informed, all of that stuff. But yeah, this is a complicated one. Thank you all so much for listening to me ramble about this topic. I am very passionate about this, as you can probably tell, because I don't like it when people get hurt, and it annoys me when people don't take responsibility for that. In any case, let me know your thoughts and feelings in a comment down below. If you did enjoy this and are ready, please do subscribe, because I make videos every week talking about kink, BDSM, pop culture news, queer issues, relationship advice, and so much more. And finally, if you want to support what I do, the best place you can do that is over on Patreon. So that will be down below. If you do already support me there, thank you so, so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.